Hello and welcome to the Thought Project. We're delighted you joined us today for our Recruitment Project webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicola Spooner. I'm a director at the Search Project, and we're a values-driven executive search business that focuses on the legal industry, building high-performing project and transformation teams. I'm joined today by Jeremy Nichols. With extensive experience in projects, programmes and portfolio management, Jeremy's worked across a range of industries, including 4 law firms. Not only that, but he's also the author of The Everyday Project Manager, which is a fantastic tool for project managers and non-project managers to fine-tune their project skills. And we're looking forward to hearing his expertise today. So Jeremy and I talk a lot about how project management is one of those things similar to recruitment that everyone can do, but not everyone knows how to do very well. And the objective of today's session is to offer a simple project framework that will help you deliver recruitment projects in a more simple way. So it could be the ad hoc projects on top of your day-to-day work, or it could be a big recruitment project or program that you're delivering. So hopefully the structure will help out with that. Jeremy, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you again.
That is a pleasure. Do you want to start by giving us an overview of project management and your approach to it in relation to today's session?
Of course. So thanks and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I think my approach to project management stems from the idea that increasingly, as companies try and get more for less and try and get more people to do different things and certainly at the managerial level take on greater responsibility for more and more things, you find that people are quite often given projects to run without actually the support of any sort of formal project management training. And on the flip side, in my work as a project manager, very often I would find I was the only person in the room, quite rightly, who on my project team who had project management training. And I came to think that it would be just really useful. I think of project management, as you know, Nicola, as a life skill as much as anything. And being able to have that project management approach enables you to deliver large pieces of work more easily, irrespective of your role. You know, you don't need to be a project manager to have projects and to deliver them well. And so what we try and do at the Everyday Project Manager is share that information, those principles of project management. And you know, in our session today, what I'd like to do is take everyone through some of those principles and see how they might apply to recruitment projects specifically. So I do have a view that you know, it doesn't matter whether you're doing a construction project or an IT project or a recruitment project. There are principles that you can apply that will enable you to deliver them all well. You know, and these are the principles that the good project managers, that successful project managers use every day. So that's the approach we're taking. And what we're going to try and do today is go through some of those principles, but also use some examples from the recruitment world. And I'm rather hoping you will help me out and bring some of that stuff to life, Nicola, for those in the recruitment industry, which is not something I have a great deal of knowledge of, but I do know projects and I do know how to share that. And so we'll use some of those examples to bring it to life from a recruitment perspective.
Brilliant. It would be great if anyone could add any thoughts onto the chat on the types of projects that you have been tasked with on top of the day-to-day recruitment projects, and we can refer back to those as well. And any questions that you have throughout, as I mentioned, please do add them in and we'll definitely come to them. Okay, so over to you. Do you want to give us...
Sure.
Give us some insight.
I shall begin, and I prepared slides and everything just to show I'm like a proper professional and everything. Here we have. If you bear with me while I just get my screen up and running. So, what I thought we'd start out with is the recruitment projects cut out and keep guide, and you can actually have this afterwards to cut out and keep. We'll share this with you. But these are my sort of. I wanted to try and boil it down. We've only got an hour and try and boil it down to sort of what are the key 5 things that you could do on every project. And we're going to step through each of these. And these are the things that for me, get these right on a project and you're taking yourself 80% of the way there. And it doesn't matter, as I say, what sort of a project you apply this to, or even if it's just a large piece of work, you can help yourself get through it more easily and more efficiently if you bear some of these things in mind. So we start with understanding the benefits, which comes down to why are we doing this? So a lot of projects get underway and actually, unless everyone's got a good understanding of the purpose behind it and actually challenge it sometimes and say, actually, is this the right thing to be doing? Sometimes you can find that a lot of time is invested in projects for which actually there isn't a clear justification. Also, understanding it helps you to make the right decisions as you make your way through the project. If you have a good understanding of what the purpose is, what the vision and the direction of travel is, then you're going to make better and faster decisions as you go through the project. And as we all know, being able to make decisions quickly and with the information available helps us all to do things more efficiently and be better at our jobs and focus on the things that we need to focus on. So that's step one. And step two is to understand the objectives. So, and benefits and objectives are terms that are used with quite specific meaning in the project management world. So obviously these words have an everyday meaning as well. But in projects, it's the objectives are the what. What is it we're actually going to do? What are the deliverables of this project? So having understood why we're doing it, you then step through and understand, right, what do we need to do that gets us the thing that we want to achieve? So understanding the objectives is the next step. And these sort of flow through. You'll see it as we go through, they all link up and give a nice, consistent approach to delivering a project or a piece of work. The third point is to establish the time, cost, and quality constraints. So every project is likely to be constrained in one or more of these areas. So that for time, is there a deadline that has to be met? For cost, what is the budget that we're working within? And for quality, what's the standard that we're trying to achieve? What's the high watermark for quality on this project? So understanding those before you embark or at any point really during the project, again, is a key bit of information that you can use to make the right decisions and to deliver the project well. Point four is, having established all those things, have a plan. So it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but this is what sets projects apart from to-do lists to a certain extent. Having a plan is scheduling what's going to happen when, and the when is the important point here. Having a task list is insufficient because it can stretch out in time and there's no pressure, either internal or external, to make sure those things get done. So have a plan, but it also becomes a communications tool for you. And that takes us neatly into point 5 around updating your stakeholders. So the final thing you should be doing is understanding who your stakeholders are, who's interested in this project, who do I need to rely on for this project, and who should I be keeping updated throughout the life of the project. Now, there are plenty of other things you can do, and there are plenty of other tools in the project management toolkit that you could bring to bear on any given project. But for me, these are the 5 things that you could apply to any project and move the dial in terms of making sure you deliver it and making sure that what does get delivered meets the original needs of the business or the person who's instigated the project. So
I think that's a really interesting summary. And it's what we talk about a lot actually is the similarities between recruitment and project management. And yes. I wish I'd known this, but decades ago when I started recruiting, how if you have this plan, the actual recruitment process works much smoother as well. They're similar concepts, aren't they? So, why do we need this person? What do we need them to do? When do we need them? How much can we spend on them? What level of quality do we need? Right, let's make a plan on how we're going to find them. And let's, most importantly, update the people that we're working with on how we're getting on that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And
very valuable.
No, and that's a really nice, you've taken that straight away and applied it to something in the recruitment world, Nicola. And that's great. And it's exactly right, because, the reason I've kept these at sort of relatively high level is not for the sake of simplicity, but actually for these are the 5 things that you can just apply anywhere. And actually, if you take that sort of structured approach, you're going to have a much better chance that the outcome, as I say, meets the original intent. So yeah, and that's fantastic that you're able to so quickly. As I said at the start, project management for me very much is a life skill. It's not just about something you do in in one part of an organization where there are a bunch of project managers running around and holding meetings and trying to look important. This is something you can do in any area of your life, and I apply it to, because I'm a project management nerd, I apply it to, things I do around the house as well, family holidays that we need to pay, understanding what we want to get out of them and how we achieve them. It means that actually what you end up with is much closer to something that everyone's happy with.
Do you have objectives for your family holiday? I love that.
Yes, they're not that. I don't tend to write them down. I don't get that far. I think I'd be a very lonely man if that was the case. But but genuinely, mentally, what is it we actually want to get out of this? What are the things we need to do to achieve that? And just having that sort of way of thinking. And again, this is what I try and communicate a lot in the training we do with the Everyday Project Manager. As much as anything, it's about having that mindset and that approach. It's not necessarily about doing all the little details of project management, but actually just having that overall approach, thinking about what your benefits are, about what your objectives are, and how this is either steering you away from them or towards them.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant.
So on that, we are going to start with a little secret, which is, I think, important to get out there, but I will ask you to keep the secret. The secret is project management is easy. Intake of breath. Obviously, project management is a very skilled profession. I have to say that because I've been employed as one for over 15 years now and would like to be in the future. But actually, the principles that sit under project management are simple enough that anyone can understand them. The things that you do are not difficult, and one area I think project management can be guilty as a profession of making it seem or needing it to appear to be much more complicated than it is. The actual principles are very simple to understand. The skill and the difficulty, in truth, comes in applying them consistently, applying them all the time, and when you get into the white heat of project delivery, as I often describe it, that's when those things can quite quickly go out the window. You forget why you're doing it. The objectives we touched on the last slide. I've seen a number of projects and had to go in and rescue projects before now in my consultancy capacity, because once we started getting into it, the objectives went out the window. Understanding the objectives is not a difficult thing to do, but trying to maintain that focus on them as you step through a project, as various things are flying around and fans are getting hit, those things are easy to forget, but actually the principles are simple. And hopefully I'll continue to demonstrate that as we go through today. But let's look at that first point. So the first step in our cut out and keep guide was understand the benefits. And I've added in here the vision as well, because they're quite closely related. But what's the overall thing you're trying to achieve? When we were discussing this earlier this week, Nicola, and you said, what's your elevator pitch? And that's it. It's exactly it. So I put it there. It's exactly the point. In less than a couple of sentences, ideally in one sentence, tell me what you're trying to do here. And that's really useful for two reasons. One, for you to understand and agree with your stakeholder, whoever's asking you to do the project, being really clear about what it is you're trying to do. But also, as you involve more and more people with the project, it's easy for that sort of high-level mission statement to get lost, or even not to be known by all those who are involved. I often describe the vision as the destination. Now, if we're planning a journey, and I don't know why I always pick Edinburgh as the destination when I give this example, but we're going to Edinburgh. If I tell everybody we're going to Edinburgh, it doesn't matter if we get split up along the way or what have you. Eventually, hopefully, everyone converges on Edinburgh. But if we start out on a journey and I just say we're going on a journey and I don't tell people where we're going, as people drift away and get split up, there's no hope of bringing them back together. That applies in all areas of business, but it's a key tenet for me of project management in particular. If you're delivering a large piece of work, or indeed any piece of work, having everyone involved aligned around why it is you're doing it is really important and helps people work more efficiently towards that goal. So why are we doing this, and agreeing that with the person who's asked you to do it. And that's one of the things we'll touch on in just a moment. But what are the things we hope to achieve? These are the benefits. So why are we doing this? As I say, the vision is the where we're going, because we want to get to here. What do we hope to achieve by doing that? Those are the benefits. We will have made our organization more efficient. We will have found the and it can be as simple as we will make a commission, or we will have found the right person for this team, however, whichever side of the fence you happen to be on. But there has to be a why are we doing this? What do we achieve? What do we get out of having done these things? And it's useful to understand who benefits specifically. So why are we being asked to do this, and who gets the main benefit of this thing having been done? That person, the person who benefits from something being done, is the customer or the sponsor. Who are you doing this project for? And I could have just said, who's the customer, who you're doing this project for? But sometimes the person who's asked you to do it isn't actually always the person who gets the main benefit from it. And actually, it's important to understand who is that, because they're going to have the largest stake in your success. So the person who gets the benefit is someone you need to be identifying and working very closely with as the person who's actually delivering the project. And you may think that you know all these things. You may think you know what the destination is. You may think you know what the benefits are, but write them down. It's a really worthwhile exercise just to put on a sheet of paper a couple of sentences. I say you should generally aim for 1 vision statement, 3 benefits, and 5 objectives. And we'll come to the objectives in a second. But if we just start with vision and benefits, what's the vision statement? 1 sentence. Up to 3 benefits. So a maximum of 4 sentences. But write that down and share that with the sponsor, with the customer. This is what we're doing. Do you agree? And then before you've even started, you've already made sure that you're going to maintain a path that takes you towards project success, because you've agreed what the outcome should be.
That's really interesting. And I'm just thinking of different examples of firms I've been working with, of those ad hoc projects that they've been delivering. And one was improving their pre-employment screening process. So the process, it works, but it's not necessarily as streamlined as it could be. So if we were to use that as an example, I guess everyone would think they knew what the reason for that was, because you want to have a good process. But that's not enough, is it, to really understand?
No, you want to talk about why you're doing that. Exactly. What do we get from having an improved process? Is it that there's a saving of time, perhaps? Is it that there's a gain that by having the improved process, you can put more people through it, and therefore you get a greater outcome? Again, understanding that, because anyone can agree that it's a worthwhile thing to improve a process. But before you invest a lot of time in actually doing that, you might want to establish that what you get out at the end of it is actually worth that investment of time. So the benefits are always what you weigh against the cost of actually undertaking a piece of work, be that cost in terms of time, people, whatever.
And if you actually, so for example, you're asked to deliver or run a project for a new pre-employment screening, if you feel when you've done this bit, when you've looked at the vision and benefits, that actually there's not that much benefit to it, what should you do what would a project manager do at that point?
A good project manager, a lot of project managers would just do the project anyway, but a good project manager would go back to the customer, the person who stands to gain from it, and say, we're about to invest X thousands of pounds in undertaking this project, but we don't see that the benefit outweighs that cost. Are you still happy to proceed? If you don't believe the benefit is there, and it is ultimately the customer's call. I often use the a house building analogy. If I want to build an extension on my home, in the belief that it will increase the value of my home by X%, and I employ someone to manage that build for me, that person can come along and go, I don't think you're going to get the value you think you're getting here. That is the right thing to do. It is the correct thing for them to tell me that they don't think my benefit is achievable. But ultimately, it's still my call. I can say, thanks for your opinion, I'm doing it anyway. Or I accept there's a risk, I won't achieve that benefit. The role of the project manager is to deliver the objectives. It's the sponsor's role to own those benefits and as the customer. And that's why I say it's really important to understand who actually does own those benefits, because ultimately they're the person who ought to be making the call on whether this goes ahead or not. And as you say, Nicola, yeah, if you look at that case and go, I don't think it stacks, the right thing to do is to have that conversation with the sponsor. Maybe they know something you don't. Maybe it's part of a wider program and this project on its own doesn't stand up, but as part of a broader program, maybe it's enabling another piece of work, and then the benefits case stacks. But it's absolutely the right thing to do, to understand them in the first place and then challenge them if you don't think they stack.
And I presume as you go through the life cycle of that project, then you can keep referring back to those benefits to remind yourself and the people that the change is actually impacting why you're doing it. Because that can get lost along the way, can't it?
It's a really powerful tool from that point of view. You know, a lot of projects is about getting a disparate group of people together and aligned around a common goal, and reminding them of what that goal is one, useful in terms of making sure the work remains directed, everyone's facing in the same direction, but also giving people purpose to what they're doing. You know, there is a reason I'm asking you to do this monotonous task, because ultimately it's going to get us to here and we get this benefit. You know, there are, you know, bits on every project which are a bit rubbish to have to do, and you know, that's and in all work, that's not projects, you know, in all work there are bits of our jobs that aren't as much fun as the other bits. Reminding yourself and reminding your team of why we're doing it is a really, really powerful tool, and helps drive projects forward. So shall we move on to the objectives?
Yes, let's move on.
So having established the why we're doing it, and again, I will just leave that, it's a point I do labour, but it's an important point to make. The customer, the sponsor, owns those benefits. So you do need to establish them, but they are the customer's concern. If you're being asked to run a project, your concern is the objectives and the delivery of the objectives. So the next thing is to understand them. If we want to achieve these things, the benefits, what are the things we need to do? Those are your objectives. And I say, as I said, you should have one vision, up to 3 benefits, and up to 5 objectives. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a good rule of thumb. If you've got if you're getting into 7 or 8 objectives, 7 or 8 things you're trying to do, chances are that's more than one project. Okay. You know, and or you're trying to stretch yourself too thin, and actually then there becomes a question about actually how many of these things actually link to the benefit, to the thing we're trying to get. And that's a really important point as well. As you work out what the objectives are, as you agree what are the things that you need to do, they must derive from the benefits. And that sounds like I'm stating the obvious, and for me, a little bit as a sort of seasoned project manager, it is stating the obvious, but it's not. It's a point that often gets lost, and so it bears repetition. The objectives must derive from the benefits, because if you have objectives that don't link to the benefits, by definition, you're going to be doing something that doesn't have any material effect on the outcome you're trying to achieve. But where a lot of people start is the other way around. They start with we want to do this thing, and then work out later what the benefit is that they're going to derive from that, if there is one, and you end up retrofitting the outcome to the thing that you've done, which, you know, common sense tells us is the wrong way around, but it does happen a lot. People go, I want to do this, so they start doing it, and then later work out if it derives.
I'm sitting there thinking of all the times I've done that right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a human thing, right? We do it all the time, and I see my background originally was technology projects, for no finer a firm than Linklaters, I might add. But you know, there were plenty of examples there and at other law firms I've worked for, particularly within technology, where you have an exciting piece of tech, and somebody's seen it, usually a partner, who goes, we want to use this is going to be terrific. And the project becomes install the technology, without any consideration to okay, well, we're going to spend 300 grand installing that. Does that actually save us 300 grand a year? Does that help us, or over 5 years or whatever? Is the benefits case there? What do we get from doing this? So people often go the wrong way around. The objectives, what you do, need to derive from the benefits. So there's an order. But the objectives, as I say, are what needs to be done. So if you've decided that the benefit is, you know, a cost saving, for example, what do you do that gets you that cost saving? And what you end up with is an agreement between the customer and the project manager, the sponsor and the PM, about what needs to be done by the PM and what needs to be delivered by the PM to deliver to set the organization up such that the benefits can be realized. The objectives themselves must be tangible. They must be deliverable. So the end state must be clear, and it is different from your starting position. It must be clear to all concerned what that outcome must be. So saying, we want to create a piece of software to do this. Being clear about what that looks like, what the end point is, when we can dust our hands off and go home, is a really important part. And if you can't do that, you are not going to have a very well-defined objective, and you're going to struggle to complete the project. So objectives must have a clear endpoint. There must be a tangible point at which you go, that's done. And again, you may think you know what your objectives are, but write them down. I'm a particular fan of project governance. It's an area of interest of mine within the broader world of projects. But where project governance quite often gets a bad rap is it's seen as bureaucratic. It's a lot of documentation. And why do we do this? The important point to remember is the writing it down seems bureaucratic. Why must we have all this paperwork? But it's not. It's the process you go through that enables you to write the thing down at the end that's important. Has everybody, by writing down the vision, the benefits and the objectives, and then sharing that with your sponsor, with your customer, do you agree that these are the things you want to get? And do you also agree that if I do these things, if I deliver you this, then you're in a position to go and get what you thought? So my builder coming back to me and saying, I'm going to build your extension now, but can we agree that once your extension is built, I've done my job, and you are then in the position to go and get the benefits you thought, whatever you perceive them to be, but I have done the bit that enables you to go and realize the benefits. And finally, on the objectives, as you write them down, beginning with a verb is quite often a good, if an objective is what you need to do, well, let's start it off with a doing word. Start with a verb. It seems like a silly thing to say, but actually it really helps frame the objectives nicely. And if you struggle again to think of what's the thing we're trying to do here, it's probably not an objective. It might be a benefit, or it might just be a task or whatever. But clarifying with a verb is a really good way of starting to frame those objectives. Excuse me.
I'm going to bring my pub test into this. When you sit in the pub or in a coffee shop chatting to a friend and they say, how's work? What are you up to at the moment? Presumably, if you've done these two steps well, you should be able to very easily and quickly explain, I'm doing a project to do X, which means A, B, and C. And you should be so clear on those objectives and what the benefits that they go, oh, that sounds really interesting, rather than, so what does that mean?
Yes, yeah, exactly. It gets rid of all those questions, not just in the pub, but just as importantly,
in the business.
In the business, with all the people that you're working with your project team. Again, when I'm running training, the training days on this, and I do whole days on this. But one of the slides I really enjoy putting up is an 80-word sentence. I have counted the words. There are 80 of them that steps through the vision and the benefits and the objectives of a particular project and just puts them in plain language. But actually you find that it's a really powerful thing. In 80 words, you've gone from the high level, here's where we're going, right down to and here's how we're going to do it. It's having these things I cannot overstate how important they are for project delivery. And the flip side of that being, when I get brought in, as I often do, to help rescue a project or to turn a project round, or to do a lessons learned and understand why a project failed, a lot of the time, it's because these things haven't been considered up front, or they've been lost in the mists of time, or in the middle of delivery. Oh, I thought we were doing that, and actually we were doing this. So hugely important to secure your delivery.
And I promise I won't ask too many questions.
No, please do.
These objectives stop the scope of that project changing, and if you're managing something and could we just do this as well, and could we just make this change here, that gives you something to refer back to, is that, well, that wasn't part of the plan, so if we do that, then, it's going to take longer, or it's going to cost more, or it's going to be, a different challenge.
That's exactly right. The scope derives very much from the objectives. So once you've understood your sort of 5 high-level statements, you then go and work out all the detail that sits beneath that. But again, the link needs to be back. And if you can't find a link between a piece of work you're doing and those objectives, then it's reasonable to say they're not part of the project. They're not delivering the thing, they're not helping towards the outcome you want to achieve, and then therefore not delivering the benefit that you want to get. So absolutely, again, having that information shared helps other people also act as guardians for your project. Why are you doing that? That actually has nothing to do with the objectives that we're trying to do here. And it stops you doing stuff that is a waste of time in terms of the project. You will find on any project you deliver, and this will be as true in recruitment as it is in IT, as in marketing, there will be people involved in your project who go, I'm just going to do this. I think it will be really helpful. And they're probably right. But it might not be anything to do with your project. If you want to go and do that, knock yourself out. It's on your own time. But can we just agree it's not delivering my objectives? Really, really useful to help frame the project in general. So that brings us to point 3. Oh, no, it doesn't. I was just going to say, to try and bring this to life a little bit, here's just some example objectives. We started with a vision for a new joiner onboarding project. So what would the vision for that be? Well, we want to have a smooth and engaging onboarding process. That's a great vision. Everyone can very quickly see what we're trying to do here. So you start the new joiner onboarding project. I've skipped over the benefits stage just for the purpose of this example, because I'm trying to highlight the objectives. But what might you do in order to lead towards that vision? So set up technology and access. Again, we're starting with the verb. Set something up. So their hardware and logins. Create a contact schedule from offer acceptance to start date. So when are we going to talk to this person? Create that schedule, and who are we going to talk to, and what are the contact points over the course of the engagement? Schedule what their day one looks like, an agenda for that, and all the inductions they might need, be it with HR, IT, their line manager. So that's another clear objective. We need to schedule all those activities. Undertake the pre-employment screening, very key and a huge part of the onboarding process, but needs to be therefore captured within that as a thing we will do. And create the contract and the administration elements that go along with onboarding a new joiner. Now there might be others, and you might tweak this on a depending on your organization or the benefits that you're trying to achieve. But just to highlight some example objectives and how they might apply to a new joiner onboarding project, we can kind of agree that if you do those things, you will have worked towards a smooth and engaging onboarding process, your ultimate destination. So moving on from the vision, the benefits and the objectives, and I've taken a disproportionate amount of time on these, but that's because they're disproportionately important to the rest of project delivery. Get this right, everything else is gravy. Genuinely, get this right, you're most of the way there. The third point is to establish time, cost, and quality. So these 3 things, they're known as the golden triangle of project management. Again, another example of project management trying to sound more important than it is. But understanding the competition between budget, deadlines, and the quality you're trying to achieve is really important. These 3 things trade off against one another. But you need to understand, for any given project, what's the budget I've got? How much money do I have to do this? Are there any deadlines? So is there a point? Quite often, so in when I do projects with law firms, very often there's a change in the law, and we're doing a piece of work to ensure we're compliant post the change in the law. So there's a very clear deadline there, and it's non-negotiable. So that's going to be driving that project. And what's the sort of quality that we're expecting to get? Is this a quick and dirty piece of work? Just get it done. We're not too fussed about it being, all bells and whistles. Or does this have to be a gold-plated solution? Are we delivering this for a partner who has an expectation it's going to be absolutely incredible? But don't take each of those things on their own. They interrelate. So if you want the gold-plated solution, understand that it will take longer, or it will cost more, or possibly both. and vice versa. If you have a very tight deadline, we want to have a new joiner on board by the end of next week. Okay, they're not going to be that good though, or the process is not going to be that great for them. So the quality therefore dips, according to how tight you make the deadline. Trade between the three. So having established what your constraints are in terms of time, cost, and quality, as anyone tries to change those things, and they will, can we do it a bit quicker? Can we get it a bit cheaper? It's not enough. A mistake a lot of people make is, can we do it quicker? Sure, we'll have a go. Yeah, and we'll try and do that. That's the wrong answer. It's, yeah, we'll have a go, but understand it's probably going to cost you a bit more, or the quality may suffer as a result of us speeding up this piece of work.
Any recruiter will know exactly what you mean there. Any line manager says, can we just speed this up a little bit? But It's actually a really good, I know we're talking about the ad hoc projects that might come on top of day-to-day recruitment, but this is really relevant for those times when you're trying to find a needle in a haystack and you have a hiring manager that's saying to you, I want the gold-plated outcome, but I want it next week and I want it for this much money. And as you say, it's not often even a trade between all three. It's like, well, none of that's going to happen. So I could either go away and rustle my paper for a week and come back and tell you in a week's time that this isn't going to happen, or we can have a conversation about it now and sort of, come up with that plan. But it's so important to realize you can't have all three all the time without any compromise. That's right.
And there is a fourth dimension to this, which I don't often dip into because it's sort of taking it a step further than it needs to be for the purposes of delivering most projects. But if somebody does want to push on all three, the outcome is simply that you increase the risk profile of the project. So you increase the risk that you're not going to be able to achieve it at all. Yeah. So putting pressure on all three of those at once, people will do it and they will try and do it, but the outcome is you increase the risk of project failure in totality. So It's much more sensible straight away, one can see, to actually just horse trade with them a little bit. And actually, most people, if you test these things to extreme, I can have you someone tomorrow, but it's going to cost you £11 million. Suddenly they go, well, all right, maybe I can wait until next week. I quite often use those extremes. Like if it's another £500,000, are you still wanting this outcome? Well, no, actually, right. Okay. So can we discuss doing it a little bit slower then to ensure that we get the outcome we want within the budget we want? It's really useful to be having those conversations. Shall we? Where am I next? On to point 4, which is, if I can get
one of your favorite topics.
Sorry?
One of your favorite topics.
One of my favorite topics. Have a plan. So having understood your objectives, understood what it is you're trying to do, the next step is to derive the series of tasks and schedule them. So again, what a lot of people who take on projects will do is create a very, and it's entirely sensible, create a to-do list, right? Here are all the things we need to do. And then they just chop through it. They just work through that to-do list. They might sort of prioritize and try and set an order to it, but what they don't do is schedule it. And that's how you deliver it. Because if you don't schedule it, it comes back to the previous point. You don't know when your end date is, and therefore you're a bit hamstrung when it comes to those conversations of, can we do it quicker, or how do we do it cheaper? What's the quality going to be like? Have we left ourselves enough time? You need to schedule the tasks to understand, but also to set expectations with all concerned. So if the vision is to get to Edinburgh and I've got an hour, I need to know that task is going to take X number of hours, and therefore the expectation that it will happen within an hour is unrealistic. Or we need to then change the conversation, right? Well, it's going to have to be a private jet then rather than the car we agreed. But having a plan enables you to have the schedule conversation, which is a huge part of most projects, but also the part that gets overlooked. People, this is where I want to help people doing this in a non-professional capacity. The non-professional project managers, will often make the mistake of just doing the task list. Schedule it. use the people around you as well to help work out what should be in that. So again, another mistake that's frequently made by people who are landed with a project is to think that responsibility for delivering it rests solely with them, and it doesn't. The mantra I go back to in a number of my training sessions is, you are not the expert. You are the project manager, but you bring together a group of experts who will help you deliver the outcome. So use the people around you. Sometimes, okay, it is just you doing everything, but know when you're being a subject matter expert and when you're being a project manager, because those things will require different skills and asks of you. But for the most part, if you're being given a project, there will also be an expectation that you will involve other people in its delivery, and you will be reliant on third parties, perhaps a supplier, to give you a particular piece of do a particular piece of the work, or maybe outsource a large amount of it. In any case, use those people and be guided by them as to how long a task takes. So again, using my house building, my extension analogy, it's no good me saying I want a kitchen extension and the builder saying that will take, according to these plans and what you want done, that's going to take 3 months, and me going, great, you've got 2 weeks. If you're going to engage a professional to do a piece of work, trust their professional judgment, and accept what they say. You can challenge it, and you can ask to understand why that is, why it would take 3 months and not the 2 weeks I had in my head based on no professional experience of ever having done this before. And they should be able to guide. And if they can't, then actually seek a second opinion. Then it's right to challenge, but equally when you're scheduling a piece of work, so long as the timeframes that are coming back to you are within the broad spectrum of things, roughly okay, we can manage that, then accept them, because then they are working to a time frame that they have set themselves, that they have said is achievable, and actually you can hold them much better to account. Yeah. If I say to that builder, no, I want it done in 2 weeks, and they say, well, I told you it was going to take 3 months, and I'm upset when it then takes 3 months, that's on me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important to be guided by the people who are actually doing the work. So having a plan is important. The format that plan takes is not. So again, one of the common pitfalls when people are given a piece of work to do is they then spend the next 20 hours scouring the internet for how to do a project plan and how to do this. And I've got a couple of examples using the objectives we had earlier of project plans. The point is, just put them in a schedule, put some dates against things. You don't need complicated project software to do this. If you're managing HS2, then yes, probably a bit of complicated project software will be quite useful. But actually, for most people managing most projects, just having something is more important than having something with a steep learning curve where you need to figure out how to use the software. So stick it in Excel. I will be hung, drawn and quartered at the project manager's weekly meeting around this. But if you're managing a project as a professional, Excel is probably not the place to do it. If you're managing a project and that is not your day job, then Excel is perfectly acceptable. Or even whisper it PowerPoint. So long as you've got some sort of representation of the tasks and when they're going to fall out, that's a plan. And it's more important to have one than to not, because you ended up getting tied up in what format it should be in. So I knocked this one up in Excel, and it has most of the basics, and I use the professional project software frequently, but the only thing I use it for more often than not, it comes down to this: what's my start date, what's my end date, and how are we doing? So I've listed the tasks down there in column B. There's a key date there, which is their start date, which a number of the other dates will hang off. But you can use Excel to do fun things like, in this example, I've got the contract follow-up we've got highlighted. You see, I've just used a tool to say, make sure that happens 7 days after the offer. You can just put that formula in Excel. That's a very basic formula that probably a lot of people are familiar with using. Add 7 to this, and you can very quickly build a plan, quite simply, quite nicely. And there are templates within Excel that will let you do this. So there's a lot of really simple stuff. And I'm not saying use Excel. I'm saying there are lots of tools out there, but just pick one. It doesn't really matter so long as you have a plan. I quite like this format because it's what I'm familiar with as a project manager. But when I run things with my wife, when we have projects around the house, and actually we run the business together. So when we do things for our company, we prefer to work on a much more calendar-based thing. And this is exactly the same as the previous plan, but it's just put in a calendar, so it's laid out visually. And I've deliberately left the template reference in there because it's in Excel. I'm just showing you this takes 5 minutes to download in Excel, and you're away, and you put your tasks against dates. This is quite a good one because you can see which fall on non-working days and at weekends. And actually, if you build up like this, you start to see, oh, that day is getting a bit overloaded. Maybe we'll move that task to the following day. A calendar is actually a really nice way of scheduling work. You don't have to have complex project management software and Gantt charts. Gantt charts being the familiar diagram that you see in project plans. They have a use, but their use is limited if you're not using that plan to its fullest extent. This is more than sufficient for most projects, and actually the way I manage my own schedule most of the time. Which brings us to point 5. Having established a plan, update your stakeholders. So who are your stakeholders? So at the start of the project, and actually at times throughout, consider, who do you need? Who's involved in your project? So your project team are stakeholders. Your colleagues might be stakeholders if you rely on them to do bits of pieces of work for the project. And who needs info from you? Also your stakeholders. So the customer who you're doing it for, maybe there's a partner who's engaged with it, or a representative within the department that has a particular interest in this. But be careful not to get too worried about people who are just interested. There will always be people who are just interested in what you're doing. They're not a stakeholder. So be aware of who's not a stakeholder. Those people who are just a bit interested in what you're doing this week are not a stakeholder, and you have no obligation to keep them updated. But there will be those who do need to know what you're up to, and spend some time working out who they are. There may be others who don't need to know, but you might like just to keep appraised because that's a nice thing to do. It's creating harmony between two departments, perhaps. But be aware when you do that who your need to knows are and who your just interesteds are. And updates can take many forms. Project managers use a report, often on a fortnightly or monthly basis to update all their stakeholders. Here's where the project's at. But updates can take many forms. It can be a conversation. It can be a weekly catch up. Here's where we are on the project. But the plan's a pretty good place to start. I like a plan because it generally sits on a one pager, and you can go, here's an idea of how the project's progressing, where we're at, where our issues are, where some of the things are that we need to focus on. And it's important when you're doing your updates. This was said to me years ago by one of my early mentors. When you're doing your reporting, when you're doing updates, be the BBC World Service. I was in this when I was having this conversation originally. We had some sort of difficult news to deliver, and I sort of said, well, how do we spin this? Being the naive junior project manager that I was. And his response was, we don't spin this, not in our reports. The reports must focus on the facts. They have to become trusted. So be the BBC World Service, be that trusted voice, that authoritative voice. And one, that's great because over time, people will realize that if it's on the report, it's a true thing that is happening, and they either need to pay attention to it or do something else or whatever. But also over time, if people know that what is in your report is to be trusted and you say everything's fine, they leave you alone. Which is also quite nice when you're delivering a project. It's being left alone. And don't be afraid to deliver bad news. And this harks back right to the statement we made at the start of the project. If the benefits case doesn't stack, say so. Don't have that conversation when everything's on fire. So do not be afraid to deliver bad news.
I have a question for you from one of our attendees.
And
I was thinking the same thing, actually. So you talk about a plan and using the plan as a report. So do you recommend a RAG status within the project plan? And is that an effective tool to use?
It is helpful. I would be, my note of caution in regard to RAG statuses is be very clear on what you mean by each RAG. So
should we give an overview of what RAG means, actually? Because
sorry, yes. So
not talking to project managers necessarily.
No, so red, amber, green status. It's basically a very simple traffic light status so that people can very quickly see the health or otherwise of a project. And you can have a RAG status for the overall project. It's red, or it's amber, we've got some issues, but we think we'll be all right, or it's green, everything's going great. Or you can do it right down to task level. This task is in the red, but these ones are all green, they're fine, they're progressing nicely. The important thing with RAG status, I do think they are useful if you want to just get a quick visual interpretation of a project's health or where the focus needs to be. But what you must be very clear about is what each status means. So if you're going to use RAG statuses, be clear that red means this, amber means this, green means this. So the rule of thumb I tend to use, red means red is disaster. Red means we have a real problem here, and it's likely that one of our baselines for time, cost, or quality is not going to be met. We are going to blow our budget, we are going to miss the deadline, or the quality that we wanted isn't going to be achieved. That's red, and it means get involved, help us out. We can no longer manage this within the project. We need external support, be it from stakeholders, senior leaders, that sort of thing, to get involved now and start helping us out with this, because within the project, we are now forecasting we can no longer meet our objectives. Amber means there is a risk that is going to happen, but right now we believe we have mitigation strategies in place and we can manage that within the project. So be aware of it, but we're not asking for help just yet. And green means everything's fine. Those are the RAG status I use as a rule of thumb. I think they are helpful, but so long as everyone's clear on what they mean.
I think that's really interesting, because I think as a non-project manager, there could be a danger of green, I've done that, amber, I'm working on it, red, yes, haven't got to it yet. But just to be really clear, those statuses are around the risk of that task.
Yeah, and you know, to be fair, it's absolutely fine to say green is done, amber, I'm working on it, red, I haven't got to it yet. That's fine, so long as everybody is clear that that's what those RAG statuses mean. You know, that's actually a perfectly acceptable way of doing it. But what you don't want to get is any you know, I put that red because it means I haven't started it yet. But you know, Fred down the road who's looking at it now thinks my project's on fire, yes, which is absolutely not the case. So be really clear about what they mean, and try and make them objective as well. So the most horrible conversation a project manager can have is to go, I've put this amber, and their boss says, that feels green to me. I think it will be all right. Can you make it green, please? Or worse, you know, or not worse, but the same. I put this as amber. No, it's red. We need everyone to get really excited about this. Make it red. It shouldn't be subjective. Also, when you're doing multiple projects, you know, you don't want the situation where one person's amber is another person's red. You need to be clear and consistent around what those things mean. So to answer your question, yeah, RAG's a very useful tool used wisely. Very useful indeed. I'm conscious we're running short on time, but just to summarize, you'll be pleased to know we are actually going to finish. The 5 key steps, there are more, but things to take away, you'll cut out and keep. Understand the benefits. Why are we doing this? Understand what we're doing. Nail those objectives. Write them down. Establish time, cost, and quality. What are the constraints of the project? Have a plan. It's not enough just to have a task list. And update your stakeholders, but be clear around your updates. Be honest. Be the BBC World Service. And I hope that's been extremely helpful to you. I would like to finish that by saying that if that has been helpful to you and you're interested to learn more, I've wrote a book. There is a book on the subject that we wrote. The Everyday Project Manager book is available in all good bookshops and a lot of terrible ones. It retails at $18.99, but for joining us today, if you use the discount code VISION, our website, you can have that for £3 off. Our website is also available, everydaypm.co.uk. We try and chuck loads of free resources up there. So there's templates up there, there's video guides, there's all sorts of things that will help you deliver projects. So do go along there, sign up to our newsletter. It is life-changing. It's not, but it will help you deliver better projects. So I do hope that's been helpful. But yeah, do please go along to our website and check it out, and sign up to our newsletter and stay in touch.
It is a really good book, actually, and it really does give some insight into how to deliver projects for those people that aren't project managers. It's been lovely to have you all here. We've had a few questions come through. If you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and hopefully we will hear from you all soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.